welcome to you. Today is Tuesday, May the 12th, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory board. So yesterday, we started on the top of the model, which is our portion, which is commercial acceleration, how you scale a business. And today we're going to talk specifically about the second portion on the far right, when we talk about predictability. Particularly and specifically today, we are going to talk about how an advisory board can help you in terms of growing your company and raising capital. And this is very important because many times organizations go for many rounds of raising capital, and it's a constant frustration because you say you started with initial meetings, initial interest, and then all of a sudden you say, what happened? Where all these investors or shareholders are going, because actually they are not interested anymore. Well, it's not that they are not interested. I think actually something actually is in underneath that I'm going to develop today. So hopefully that will give you a better understanding how certain things operate from the other side, not from the things that you want to do. You want to raise capital, and how you're driving the company is what is happening on the other side, which is when the capital or the people that actually are managing this capital are looking into organizations when they're raising. So as I mentioned yesterday, we talked about scaling, and today we move into point 2, which is how an advisory board operating system helps you with predictability. And this sits under the growth and capital, as I mentioned, not an easy or pleasant topic many times, because it's very hard to explain how money works. So growth does not become fundable because the story is exciting. And probably you have seen this before. So it's very, very nice to explain what you do, how you plan to do, the size of the market, the addressable market, you name it. But growth becomes fundable when the board can, or the executive team or the founder can explain the logic, the risks, the numbers, and the trade-offs, right? So remember these things: logic, risks, numbers, and the trade-offs. So that is where the international advisory boards can earn their keep. And where I'm coming from with this is from the Business Development Bank of Canada, a study that says that 65% of businesses that formed advisory boards sought accounting or financial skills, and 51% of them looked for sales and marketing. That was the next group of people that we're looking for. And that combination matters because growth and capital needs to sit together, right? So finances and what is going to drive that growth. Now, why I'm mentioning these international advisory boards, because actually these are studies that start to support that actually companies that have certain group of people in their advisory boards are more successful. And yesterday I mentioned 24% increase in the revenues and 18% increase in their productivity compared to companies that don't have advisory boards, right? So this is why I want to make a note here, a footnote. I don't build advisory boards as vanity panels. What I assemble is international advisory boards around milestones. And if the milestone is growth capital and the board needs capital structure, investor readiness, governance, revenue quality, and execution expertise, we look for that particular profile. So you don't need to hire an expensive executive and hope they cover for all. You don't need, what you do need is you don't even need a large consulting firm parking your business for months. What you really need is a right expert for the right period, reviewed their panel every 6 months, so you can swap members as the milestones of the company change. So let me recap this thing. So what I build is international advisory boards that address the milestones that you're going through right now to make sure that you achieve what you need to achieve. Because one of the biggest mistakes, I'm going to address this in a second, is having big flashy names in your advisory boards. And what happened is that they are used to large organizations, like 50 or 20,000 employees, 50,000 employees across the globe. And when you are in a smaller organization and a smaller budget, their advice is absolutely spot on and priceless, though the execution of that advice could be a big challenge because you don't have the budget, you don't have the resources, you don't have the teams or the preparation or the external help, extra help that you need to execute that. So, three problems to consider. And the first one is going back to the capital raising. So, the first problem is the reactive funding. And here's it's coming from the Bank of England that say the investment intentions remained weak as March this year, 2026. And when the investment stays cautious, then the point is actually capital rewards preparation, not panic. And what I mean with this is that when you are looking for capital, and because we are growing the company, we're going to another market, etc., and it's not something actually is very solid, very well planned, very well structured in terms of jurisdiction, contracts, taxation structure, etc. So that sounds more like an impulse activity rather than a planned and well thought process and sequences of what will happen next. And you'll be very surprised that even if the capital is available and probably happened to you, you start to see that you're dragging or drifting or having very meaningful conversation, and at one point the capital disappeared. So people that were about very excited at the beginning, they start to see the structure that you have and they go like probably no. And you say, why? Because what you think it is the right thing to do things, the market, particularly the market that has a capital to invest, sees the things differently, and you need to adapt to what they see and how they put the things together. And if you are the organization that say we reached to this point doing it our way, and we continue doing it our way, probably you're going to face a big problem because you're not going to raise the capital you need to satisfy that ambition. The second problem is a finance without design. And this also comes from the British Business Bank 2026 report that covers a funding market in which smaller businesses use a range of finance options, including debt, equity, and flexible funding. So more choices is useful, but one or only if the board, the executive team, or you as a founder understand the consequences. And here's an interesting thing. So the study showed, what I bring this study because of three things. They mention debt, they mention equity, and they mention flexible funding. Now, the three of them have a different way to approach the structure that you're going to present when you're pitching them. When you are pitching debt, one of the things to consider is that you remain with the whole control of the organization, right? Because actually the organization have to be capable to demonstrate that can repay that debt. That's a predictability that you're looking for. When you're pitching for investors or companies that you are going to exchange the money or capital for equity, you have to pitch it in a different way, because actually you're going to give portion of the control of the organization to the people that have in exchange equity for the capital. So then you have to structure organization in a different way. You cannot you cannot have the same structure for debt than for equity. You may have it, by the way, so that's not a big problem. But you have to consider that sometimes the problems are not coming right now when there is a successful raise and you exchange equity for capital. What will happen in a year time or 2 years time, because they tighten the terms to make it favorable for them, obviously, because they need certain reassurances, they need certain sales targets for their return of investment. But also you have to be careful to be prepared for that. And in terms of flexible funding, if you have a mix of things, also the complexities are starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because you have to satisfy many owners, if you may, many lords. So you have to be careful how you structure when you have flexible fundings, in which are all these options. So more choices, as I mentioned, are useful, but only if the board or your executive team or yourself as a founder understands the consequences of each one of them. And particularly if you are combining many of them as a one option. And the third problem to consider is market timing. And timing is very, very important because the opportunities exist, but the window is not always open, right? So if you are delaying or not very proactive, or you think that we are going to do that when we cross that bridge, I can assure you that you are pretty much making the situation more difficult than it requires to be. So imagine this: if you are a climber, that you have, you do the 7 peaks of the world. All these peaks in the world require oxygen. So the route is very clear, the process is very clear, the training is very clear. So you can do all those things very, very well and say, yeah, I can start to climb those 7 peaks in the world, and you start your tour to pick these peaks. But what happens if you have one mistake, which is the oxygen tank, which is your capital for growing? If the oxygen tank is not the right one, you might have everything set up and ready to go. But if your capital is not ready and you have the wrong capital there, could be equity, could be debt, or could be a mix of funding, etc., that can also jeopardize your achievement in terms of reaching to the peak. So I'm sure that probably you experience capital raising involving many meetings and initial interest, but in the end, you start the tour all over again. So you have to go around again to raise capital because the round never materialized. So many of these things probably hit that point that perhaps you were not aware. So the question is why this is happening. Where do you get stuck? And let me show you a few things. You get stuck because you treat funding as a single thing or a single event. Oh, we're going to raise capital. Debt, equity, convenience, investor rights, and controls are different levers. So different things that you have to play around. So each changes the company differently, as we mentioned. The second thing you get stuck is because you underuse your advisory board. So if you have an advisory board, and I'm not talking just about your accounting team or your legal team, I mean an advisory board as a group of people that comes to here to help your organization to achieve your milestones. So again, the Business Development Bank of Canada study found that advisory boards help reassure shareholders and investors and improve strategy business decisions. And here's the point: strategic business decision, right? Business outcomes. Those are capital outcomes too, not just soft benefits of saying, oh, we have a very good team of people here that's advising. Also helps you with this reassurance and decision making towards these outcomes. And the third thing that you get stuck is because the growth plans arrive before the capital logic is in place, right? So people start to raise capital and start to realize, oh, we need a plan for this growth. But the plan might be, like I said, we are going to, for example, we are going to jump to another geography. We're going to grow, opening branches or offices in another country, right? So that's not really the plan. So you're looking for capital towards that particular event, but actually then say what you're going to do when you land there. And probably you establish that. Say, oh, we're going to open partnership, we're going to delivery, distribution routes, we're going to do efficiencies in terms of manufacturing or service delivery, whatever is the case. But then when you start to raise capital, you realize that is falling short because actually it's not a plan it's a plan what you want to do from here to there, but not what happened from there to the following actions and steps that you need to take when you arrive there. And this is something that actually is seen many, many times in the pitch decks or in when you're talking to investors or to the financial institutions. They go and say, well, thank you very much. It's a great idea. Unfortunately, we won't be able to help here because they don't see exactly that. So they see the capital logic, but they don't see the growth plans after the capital is awarded. So the advisory board should ask a different question. So what capital does this growth need, right? So what is a capital is going to do when the growth is going to need? Or the other question is, what does that capital cost, right? So we might have all these in place, but how much is costing us? Is going to cost us the lack losing control, or a more predictable revenue in terms of actually repaying the debt, etc. And what the last question I will ask is, what decision rights comes with it, right? So who is going to make all the decisions once you get that capital? So what will happen if capital planning started before the company needed the money, right? So let's take a look at practical moves, what an international advisory board does at this stage of the organization. So the first thing I would say is build a capital map. List every funding source, the convenience, refinancing dates, shareholder rights and decision constraints. If it affects control or timing, so then you as a board member or as an executive team or as a founder need to have that very, very visible, right? The second scenario is test the growth plan. Ask what happens if revenue slips, if the next raise takes 6 months longer, if a lender tightens their terms, or if an investor demand rise that change the future control. And the third thing that I would suggest is use the international advisory board as a readiness panel. So the right members stress test the pitch, the numbers, the governance story, and the capital structure before investors or lenders do it for you, right? You don't want to see you start getting in conversations and then they come back to you and say, well, we are missing this and this and the other. Is very, very bad in terms actually. It's not bad in a bad way. I mean, actually, it's a bit like the sensation is that you're not prepared. You're not ready for this. And actually that start to get a bit of a kind of in the no side before even you started, that in the, okay, we are interested in this. You seem to be knowing what you're doing, and we like that, right? So you want to be in that position and say, oh, this makes sense. We like what we're seeing. Let's start to have a second meeting and let's develop this conversation. So if you are a non-executive director, you're in a C-suite or an executive team, or you're a founder and want to understand how an international advisory board can make your capital and their growth cleaner, faster, and more credible, let's have a chat. A 30-minute call so I can understand particularly where you're coming from, where you are today, and where you want to go, and how an international advisory board that adapt to your needs, your milestone, can help you to achieve what you're looking for. So let's pause here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will move from predictability, so the things actually put you in a very, very, very pole position, if you may, to systems. And systems, because capital only stays useful when the company has the controls and the resilience underneath it, right? So if you don't have this big, big, solid foundation, not big in terms of large, I mean actually solid foundation in terms of your system, your workflows, operation, procedure, etc., then capital also will look at your organization and might not be very happy with that. So have a great day, and